Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ditch the Store. I still keep wanting to say not the farmer's wife, but it's Ditch the Store now, and we're moving forward, cats. Anyway, episode 112 this week. I still can't believe we're at that many episodes and I've only ever missed 1 week. It's like, woohoo. And this week we are talking about a funny topic. We're talking chickens with afros and 5 toes, which in itself sounds really weird, but wait till I get into it and you'll understand what I mean. Before we start talking about chickens though, quick update for anybody who is interested in getting goats. Now is the time to go visit your goat friends. It's rutting season here in Australia. And for anybody who's never had female goats living on their farm or their property or been around female goats, if you've ever wanted to have female goats, now is the time to go visit your friends and spend some time with their does while they are in heat. I think it's kind of like that whole thing of, they used to say babysit somebody's kids and it'll put you off having children. If you have to be around does during the rutting season and you've not experienced it before and you're keen to get does yourself, it's a really good eye-opener for what you would be in for. And we have literally spent the last 2 weeks with, out of the 7 does, if you don't include the babies, the 7 does that are in the paddock closest to the house have all been in season at some point in time, and they don't come in together. They come in off the back of another one. So, Hazel was in season, and then 2 days later, Lucy was in season, and then 2 days later, Sage was in season. 2 days later, Princess was in season. It was a nightmare. We have literally listened to does screaming in the paddock for the last 2 weeks. And because we're trying to do an artificial insemination program this year, I have ordered the seeders, which are the progesterone plugs that go into the vagina, and they stop the cycle so that you can then control when they come into season. I've ordered them, but they haven't arrived yet. So we just have to bear with it and put up with these heat cycles until that happens. And it can be really frustrating. It's so loud and so full on, and each doe is different. So some does will only scream for like 2 or 3 days. Hazel and Lucy both scream for 4 days straight. And I mean, non-stop. They lose their voice. They scream so much. So if you ever want to doze, now's the time to go and sit with somebody else's doze and go, is this really what I want? And, that's fine if you're going to have a really good breeding cycle where you are definitely going to get them into kid every time they come into season at the right time, when it's now rutting season. But if you are somebody who just wants a doe as a pet, I would strongly advise against it if you have not lived through a cycle of a heat season. And the only reason I say that is because that's the first thing you see on the pages, on the Facebook pages, where people go, oh my God, my doe is screaming her lungs out. She's been doing it for 2 days. How long is this going to last? And it's like, it's going to last 3 to 4 days, and it's going to happen every 3 weeks until you get her in kid. So if you're only getting a goat as a pet, my very strong recommendation is to get wethers. Wethers have so many less health issues. You don't have to worry about the breeding cycles. You don't have to worry about them peeing on their heads like you do with bucks, because we should never, ever keep bucks intact and entire unless you intend to breed with them. They can be aggressive. They smell. They can be hard to manage. They can grow a lot bigger than what you're expecting. So please don't keep bucks unless you're planning on it, on breeding. Does, I would not recommend having does unless you're planning on breeding. Honestly, if you just want goats as pets, and I know a lot of people out there do, we've just sold Bill and Ben to our friends up at Jarrah Park, and they are, when I spoke to Michelle about it, she was like, oh, should I get a doe? That'd be lovely. I said, don't. Get 2 wethers. So much less hassle, and they've settled in really well up there. So, yeah. Anyway, that's the rutting season news from the farm. Now, we're still talking about chooks this week, and, so many people talk about Isa Browns and Australorps and just your typical breeds. And I have talked about breeds in the past. I've talked about, different breeds for dual purpose, so you've got a meat bird and an egg layer and things like that. But there's lots of breeds out there. I don't even know the exact number of how many chicken breeds there are out there, but there would be well over 100. I would say there'd be a couple of hundred. And depending on which region you live in, which continent you're on, will depend on the breeds that are available to you. So one of the ones that I'm going to mention today is definitely not available in Australia. The handy helper is in love with this chicken, and he wouldn't care what it costs to buy fertile eggs to hatch out. He would absolutely try and get a breeding pair if he thought he could. So they're not always available in every continent, and you have to take that on board. But I thought it might be fun to go through and look at some of these breeds that are just really out there and just a little bit different and not your typical Isa Brown or Australorp, And don't get me wrong, they have an absolute place in society, those birds. But wouldn't it be fun to have something a little bit different? And, we went down that path with our Brahmas. So I was gifted 2 Brahma roosters from a friend who has bred. She incubates and hatches out eggs quite often that she gets gifted. And if she gets roosters, she gives them to me. And she always does I don't want to know if you're going to put them in the pot, just do it. Don't tell me. And quite often we have put them in the pot, the roosters that she's given us, because she's in an urban area. She can't keep roosters. We can have roosters until they're, eating weight. But these ones, when I went to pick them up, I didn't realise they were Brahmas. And I went round to pick them up and I'm like, oh my goodness, these are beautiful. They were gorgeous. Anyway, we called them Goose and Maverick. One was white, one was black. And we called them Goose and Maverick. But we ended up losing Goose. And we literally think he just had a heart attack. And some of these bigger roosters absolutely can just fall off the perch like that. Anyway, Maverick is chugging along just fine. We went and found a breeder who has Brahma hens, and we bought what we thought were 10 hens off him. They were 10-week-olds, so there was a couple that were a bit younger. They were 6-week-olds, but we brought them back to the farm and put them in with the Brahma roosters, and then we lost Goose. So then we had Maverick in there with these hens. And I didn't realise that Brahma hens take so long to lay, but they're going to be around the 7 or 8 month mark before they start laying. So they're very close to laying now. I'd say in the next month we will start getting eggs. And they have grown into be beautiful girls. They are just lovely. Now, in amongst them all, there was one that was a very unusual colour, very creamy coloured, and she didn't look like the other Brahma hens, which was a bit surprising, but, we'll go with it. There was also 2 that were white and black, which didn't look like the Brahma hens at all. And it's turned out that those 2 are not Brahma hens. We didn't think they were Brahma, straight pure Brahmas. We thought they were Faverolles, or Faverolles, I think it's pronounced. We thought they were that breed because they have 5 toes. And that's a breed characteristic only of a very few select chicken breeds. It's actually a genetic trait there's a list of about 4 of them that have the 5-toe thing. Anyway, these 2 black and white ones had 5 toes. It turns out they're both roosters, but they're Faverolles roosters. Now, I was doing some research on the colouring of Brahmas because I'm really hoping to breed these Brahmas and be able to sell some of the offspring, but also to build up our stock because we've had Isa Browns and I said I'm not going back to Isa Browns again. I feel like they lay consistently for 12 months and then they start falling off the perch. And I want birds that are going to last me a bit longer than that. I want birds that I can get used to and get a real cycle happening with. And Isa Browns, well, commercially, they're probably a great pick for selling eggs. I'm not doing this as a sole commercial enterprise. I'm doing it because I actually like breeding chickens as well. So I had a look to see why this one Brahma was a completely different colour. And it turns out she's not a Brahma. So she's a Faverolles, which is awesome news because I have a Faverolles rooster. And out of the 2 Faverolles roosters, there's one I would definitely keep. He's a beautiful example of Faverolles. And now I know that I have this Faverolles hen, and she is a salmon Faverolles, which for those watching on YouTube, I will put up photos of these as I'm talking, so you'll be able to see them. So if you're listening on the podcast and you want to have a look at the images, drop over to the YouTube channel, Mojo Homestead on YouTube, and have a look at the photos. She's a salmon Faverolles, and I'm going to keep her and segregate her with this rooster and try and breed some Faverolles as well as my Brahmas. So I feel like I'm going into this heritage bird breeding program that I haven't really told the handy helper about, and he's going to be shocked and amazed and so happy with that outcome. Anyway, that's where we're at with ours. So I thought I'll talk about these unusual breeds that people don't always know about and don't always kind of have much involvement with. And the things that kind of define these chicken breeds as being unusual, and in some cases you would see they would be show standard birds. So if you go to a poultry show, if you went to, excuse me, a country show, a fair or a fete or anything like that, you might see these chickens displayed. But usually the reason that they will be singled out as being unusual or heritage or rare birds is their looks to start with. So they will either have unusual feather formations or 5 toes, or they might have funny little feather top knots, like feather hats that they've got, or with my Aracanas, they have little tufts of feathers that stick out from the sides of their cheeks. It can be their temperament. So some of them are game birds, runners and things like that. Egg colour can be another thing that singles them out. And certainly with our Aracans, they lay blue eggs. But you can get all kinds of egg colours. The Faverolles, and I'll talk about it later, they can lay a pinkish tinted egg. You can get green eggs. You can get the copper morans, which have the really chocolate terracotta coloured egg. The other thing that they can have is a feather pattern that's a little bit unusual. And we've talked about that as far as the, having a feather hat on or feather tufts on their cheeks. But also some of them, like bantams and friselles, will have a curly feather instead of a standard feather like a normal bird. And those things usually define them as being rare or different or unusual. What does it has go? That's unusual. Now, why that might be interesting to you, a lot of homesteaders are just after the most economical and frugal version of what they can get. So Isaac Browns, Australorps, really hardy birds that lay eggs or produce meat might be what you're after because that's the easiest thing for you as a homesteader. But you might want something that has a really unusual egg colour or something that's really docile and fantastic with kids. You might want to have a petting zoo type situation where you can have people come in and have them, spend time with chickens. And to do that, you need a really docile chicken because not every chicken is going to be docile. And not even, even if it's a breed trait to be docile, that doesn't mean every chicken that you get that's that breed will have that trait. We've got Aracans. People say Aracans can be aggressive. We've got Aracans that are as calm and beautiful as, goat chicken and her babies. She is just a really beautiful temperamented Aracan. She's not at all aggressive or dominant. But it could also be that you want to help out with breed conservation. And certainly I've seen that with people with sheep and goats and cows where they specifically breed a particular breed of livestock in order to help conserve that breed. We don't want our breeds to go extinct, particularly if they're a heritage breed that's been around for years and years. The idea of keeping it going and keeping it the breed where people can still see it. We don't want to just see these breeds in museums where you go and look at a stuffed animal and go, oh, wow, that chicken would have been really cool. What a shame it's extinct. It could just be that you actually like the bird. And for me, with the Brahmas, I looked at them and went, I don't care. I like them. They're huge. They look like gentle giants to me. So that's what I like about them. And again, when we got these hens and we discovered that one of them was what's called a salmon Faverolles, we've nicknamed her Caramel because she looks caramel coloured. The salmon Faverolles it's almost like a caramel feather colour. And Handy Helper looked at her and said, I just love her colour. She is the most beautiful out of all of them. She's got that beautiful colouring. So that's why we decided to keep them. And he does know that we are keeping them. When I joke and say it's on his hit list of, that he's got to now build me more sheds, he actually knows. So I didn't spring it on him at the last minute. So I want to go through 5 breeds that are breeds that you may not have heard of, or you might have heard of, but you may not know a lot about them. And they're unusual breeds. They're breeds that you wouldn't necessarily come across going to the produce shop to buy some more chickens. You may not come across them in that, if you went in and said, oh, have you got this breed? They might look at you with weird eyes and go, no, we have no fucking idea what you're talking about. So the first one that I'm going to talk about, and I'm sure I'm going to pronounce this wrong, so apologies to any of my Indonesian listeners out there. Indonesian was a language taught at my school and I was never any good at it. Ayam Cemani. That's how I want to say it. It's Ayam Cemani. And these chickens are the queen of goth. They are black chickens. And when I say black, I don't just mean they have black feathers. I mean, not like an Australorp. These chickens, and for those watching on YouTube, I will put a photo up. They are all black. Everything is black. Their eyes are black, their combs, their wattles, everything black. Their legs are black. Their meat is black. Their eggs are black. Everything about these chickens is black. And this is the one that the handy helper, if he could get his hands on a breeding pair, he would build them the Taj Mahal of chook coops and they'd be living the life of luxury. He would love to breed these ones. So feathers, skin, beak, legs, even their internal organs are black. And it's a genetic trait, and I'm going to read from my thing because I'll never get it right. Fibromelanosis is what the genetic trait is called. And that genetic trait causes black everything. Black meat, their skin, their flesh, their eggs, their internal, everything's black. They are very cool looking chickens and they are available, as far as I know, they're available in the US. So if you're in the US, you're very lucky. You should be able to, for the right price, and I won't say they'll be cheap. It'll be expensive, but you may be able to come across a breeding pair or at least some fertile eggs and try and breed your own. But they are an Asian bird and they're not common. They are rare. So they are a breed that needs some assistance. So if you are thinking about a rare breed and you're in a country where you're able to get them, I would say go for it. And if you do, please post a photo on social media and link us in because the handy helper and I are fascinated by these ones. So the eggs are medium-sized, cream-coloured eggs, it says. I don't know why I've got cream-coloured eggs here. They're black eggs. They're black. I don't know. I've not seen anybody crack an egg, so I don't know whether the insides are black as well. So if you know about that, hit me up and let me know. I'm guessing the yolk would be yellow, but if everything else is black, including their internal organs, yeah, I'm going to guess the inside of the egg might be black as well, which would be way cool. Could you imagine eating a black egg? Anyway, they're not the best layers. They only lay between 80 and 100 eggs per year, which could have something to do with their rare status. Maybe they might be a problematic breeder. And, you know, that happens. That's why sometimes genetically things do go astray because it's hard to breed animals that aren't prolific breeders in the first place, like naturally prolific breeders. Temperament, my understanding from the research I've done is they're quiet, but they're very flighty. They can be spooked fairly easily and they're constantly watching and alert. And again, that could be because they're that rare stat. They could have had a lot of predators in their natural environment and that's just then a behavioural trait that's kind of carried through with them. Now, they, like I said, they're heritage and listed as rare. So if you are interested in those, you will probably have to pay a small fortune to get a breeding pair. But wow, I think they'd be worth it. And obviously not available here in Australia. It's really hard to get, like even rare plant seeds and things like that, it's really hard for us to get them into Australia. There's a lot of hoops we have to jump through. And sometimes it frustrates me that the government doesn't try a little harder to help us to do these things. Because I think there's a lot of chicken breeders in Australia that would probably grab these chickens and go to town breeding them. You know, we have quite a big chicken breeding community in Australia. And so to be able to get them into Australia would be awesome. And I know that they balk at it because of biosecurity. And that's fine. I understand that biosecurity is important, but you'd still think, you know, put them into quarantine and let them sit there in quarantine for 6 months. I mean, I'm surprised somebody hasn't done it already. Anyway, they're probably not a beginner-friendly one. If you're a beginner and you are looking to go into heritage birds, I would say that this is probably not the right choice. So the next one on the list is the silkie. Now, silkies, I always referred to silkies as bantam silkies, but you can get larger silkies. And the thing with silkies is they look like fluffy little teddy bears. They literally have a completely different feather. to other chickens, and that is their feather will never allow them to fly. To touch it, it feels like silk. That's why they're referred to as silkies. They're an Asian bred bird again, but it's more like fur. It's like to touch their feathers is more like fur. Now, they have the melanosis thing as well, the genetic trait. So silkies actually have black flesh. And the meat is, in some cultures, considered a delicacy to have bantam meat in your food. And that would be black. It would look like black chicken meat, essentially. And they have blue earlobes. Now, they are one of our special ones that come with 5 toes. It's, again, a genetic trait that only occurs in certain birds. And silkies are one of those birds. So they actually have the genetic trait of the melanosis with their black flesh, and also with and I want to say it's called pectoral, or not pectoral. It sounds like a dinosaur name. I'll work it out and put a little clip up later for it. But they basically, there's 4 or 5 chickens that have 5 toes, and they're one of them. Now, they're not prolific layers. They lay 100 to 120 eggs a year, and they are small eggs. If they're bantam silkies, they're definitely very small eggs. But depending on what your needs are, that might be fine for you. They're very sweet and very calm and very docile. This makes them awesome with children. So if you have small children and not a very big backyard, then a bantam silkie would be a really good one to have a look at. You don't need to have a million big eggs. With enough bantam silkies, you would still be getting enough eggs for your family. They are great for first-time chicken owners because they're so docile and because they're so easy to manage and handle and everything. One thing that I do need to say about them is their feathers, because they have those different feathers, they don't repel water. So if you live in a super wet environment, if your backyard is very muddy and you can't build a shelter that's going to be completely waterproof for them, then they're probably not the pick. And that's because they will get wet and stay wet. They don't dry off. They don't repel water like other chickens do. My Isa Browns and Australorps and Araucans will walk around in the paddock while it's raining, and literally they come into the shelter, do a big fluff and a shake, and all the water flicks off their feathers and they're fine. So bantams don't have that ability, so you really have to be careful of that. Now, one other thing to mention about silkies, is that they can go broody a lot, and they aren't prolific breeders themselves, but they will sit on any eggs. So you can actually incubate under them because they go broody so often. You can actually chuck chicken eggs from another breed or even any bird egg. And my understanding is they have used silkies in the past to hatch out other bird eggs. They'll put them under them and they don't care. They'll hatch anything out. So that could be handy if you don't have a rooster but you have a source of fertile eggs, having a silkie that will sit. And you see photos from time to time where it'll be a tiny little silkie hen and these massive babies next to her. It's like, oh, darling, they're not your babies. Now, the next one is one that I actually didn't know too much about until I started doing a little bit of research for this article, for this episode. Cream leg bars. I'd heard of them and I knew that they were a coloured egg layer. So, they fall into that category with the East Eggers like the Araucanas. But this interests me, and I'm actually interested now in maybe sourcing a few. So they, smallish bird, they have a greyish blue with a gold tinge to them. And the roosters can look a little bit more, like all male bird kind of species. The men always look a bit flashier than the women. So the roosters can look a little bit flashier than the hens do. But they are an auto-sexing breed of poultry. Now, there's sex-linked chickens, which are your Isa Browns, which will always throw a female. If they're a certain colour, they'll always throw that female. So you can breed for females is what I'm saying. With the auto-sexing, it's not that you breed for them so much as when they hatch out, you can tell straight away whether you are looking at a hen or a cockerel, a rooster. And I'll put up, for the YouTube watchers, I'll put up a couple of photos. to show what I mean, they have a different feather colouring pattern if they're a hen or a rooster. So as soon as they're hatched out, you know, there's no guesswork. There's none of that posting to Facebook and going, hey, everybody, you tell me whether this is a hen or a rooster. Like, do the wattles look big enough? Does it look like it's getting the plumage on the tail? You know, that kind of thing. None of that. These ones, cream leg buzz, as soon as they hatch, you can look at them and go, that is a cockerel, that is a pullet. Absolutely, just based on the colour, and that's it. So I'm really interested now to find out if anybody locally has these, because I think that would be very interesting to be able to incubate eggs and have them hatch out and know straight away whether you're looking at they're going to the pullet pile or they're going to the rooster pile for the freezer. So they lay a gorgeous blue egg, and they are pretty good layers. They lay about 180 to 200 a year. So that's definitely up there with, you know, it's not the 300 a year that you get out of Isers or Australorps, but it's still a reasonable amount when you factor in that there's usually a 6-week period there that they're not laying. Their temperament is friendly and curious and not too flighty. So I don't know whether they'd be great maybe around kids and things like that, but, you know, depending on what your circumstances are. And obviously they have that egg colour. And if you want uniform looking birds, then these are birds that are all going to look the same. There's not going to be a lot of variation amongst them because their feather colouring is dictated by the genetics. They are a little bit more talkative. So if you're in a small urban environment and your neighbours aren't that keen on you having chickens, again, these may not be the chickens for you. And they can fly. They are a little bit flighty, as in they will fly over fences and things like that. So again, if you're in a smaller urban environment where you can't contain them quite as well, or you're very close to your neighbours, then maybe this one isn't the one for you. Now, the next one I want to talk about is the Faverolles, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Faverolles as it looks, and it is the curly feather diva. She is going to have a set of feathers that you can't look past. It's going to be the first striking feature you see with these ones. Now, the interesting bit about Faverolles is it's not actually considered a breed. Okay, so it can happen with certain breeds. So Cochin, Polish are the two main ones, and that it comes from a genetic crossbreeding of mum and dad, where one of them has the curly feather genetics. And if they have the curly feather genetics, that can result in certain offspring having the curly feather genetics, but it doesn't guarantee it. So even if you're breeding two curly feathered birds, if one of them had a genetic trait coming from a parent who didn't have the curly feather gene, then you can still have offspring that don't have curly feathers. I love how biology works. It confuses the hell out of me sometimes, you know, brown-eyed people producing a blue-eyed baby, but it's that genetic, like there's a 25% chance that the chick's going to be born without curly feathers because it's got a grandparent who doesn't have curly feathers. So that genetic line can kind of come down and miss a generation and go to the next. So it's not technically a breed, but you can look for them and get them, particularly of those breeds, the Cochins, the Polish, things like that, where they have these beautiful curly feathers. And again, for those watching on YouTube, I will put the photos up so that you can see what I mean. It's a very unusual kind of curl to the feather, and they look like they would be high maintenance as far as cleaning and things like that. But they do look very cute. And if you're interested in that type of thing, then that would definitely float your boat. Now, depending on the base breed, they'll generally lay between 150 and 180 eggs a year, and that's those breeds. That's what those breeds that generally have that curly feather trait will throw anyway. They are very calm and they're often handled a lot, but that can also be a behavioural thing due to their novelty because they look like little toy chickens. So they probably get handled a lot more, and that has over the years made them a lot calmer. They would be good if you are somebody who really likes a showy bird. If you're only interested in eggs or meat, all of the ones that I looked at, all the breeds that have that curly feather genetic trait are all smallish birds, so I don't think they'd be very good as a dual-purpose bird. And, you know, they do lay enough eggs to warrant keeping them as an egg-keeping bird, but it may not be, you know, to me, I look and go, I'm not sure that I can see a purpose in those. But They do look very attractive. And certainly if you were showing birds, these would be a great one. Now, one thing about them, the downside, is that the feathers don't provide great insulation or waterproofing, which means that if you live in a really cold climate, a really wet climate, it's going to be a little bit harder to maintain these birds because you're going to have to keep them in a run that is 100% waterproof and that has some insulation so that so that they're not getting cold all the time. You don't want them getting cold all the time. So they need a little bit extra care compared to other birds would. Now, the last one I have on my list is Faverolles. And these, like I say, I didn't do any research into them until we actually got some. And then when the guy that was selling them to us said, oh, I'll give you these 2 Faverolles to go in as well. I don't know whether they're hens or cockerels, but I'll throw them in. He said, you'll know them separate from the others because they've got 5 toes. And I kind of went, what do you mean they've got 5 toes? And they absolutely have 5 toes. And again, for those on YouTube, I will whack up a photo now of our boys. They absolutely have 5 toes, which is a genetic trait. Like I say, it happens. There's Houdins, there's the Silkies, Faverolles, and I can't think there's 2 others that also have the 5-toe genetics. But they are bearded. They have little cheek muffs, little cheek feathers. They have feathered legs because Faverolles were a breed that was developed in France and they used Brahman stock to produce them. So that's why they kind of look a little bit similar and it's hard to tell them apart. So they've got the feathered legs and 5 toes. And they are very docile. These roosters that we've got, I've never had a problem, and neither has OJ. When he goes into the yard with me, a couple of times OJ has sparked up the rooster's interest and they've given him chase. But these ones have never had a go at him. Same with our Brahma, our big maverick Brahma boy. He has never, ever given chase. He's never given us any reason to think of him as aggressive or anything like that. Very calm and quiet. Now, with the Faverolles, like I said, there's a salmon pink colouring, and the salmon pink colouring is just gorgeous. It's almost like a caramel, and that's our girl, we've nicknamed her Caramel. They can also have flashy black and white, which is predominantly the roosters, which our 2 boys are the black and whites. And they were, like I said, they're bred using Brahma stock, so they have that very similar appearance, particularly with the feathered legs. They've got feathered legs, and so do the Brahmas. Now, they're definitely, my girl and the 2 boys are definitely Faverolles because I've checked and they do have the 5 toes. And I looked at my Brahmas just a bit on the safe side. I'm like, oh, they look so much alike. But the Brahmas don't, they have 4 toes. So absolutely different genetics there. Now, the Faverolles can lay anything from a light brown through to a pink tinted egg. So I am super excited for our salmon girl to start laying, because if she lays a pink tinted egg, I'm going to be very excited about that. You'll see it all over social media. And they lay about 120, 200 eggs a year. So again, not prolific egg layers, but reasonable egg layers. And certainly they are big birds because of the Brahma genetics in them. So they would definitely make a dual purpose bird. If you were interested in having a bird that's both practical but also attractive, then these would be a really good option. And like I said, they're very calm, friendly and gentle. The roosters included. We have not had a problem with either of the rooster boys that we've got in there. And they do well in a mixed flock because they're not aggressive, so they don't spark up any kind of irritation. We probably won't mix these Brahmas and the Faverolles with our rest of our laying stock because we've got some Araucans in there and they can be a little bossy. Some of our girls aren't bossy at all, but even some of our Australorps can be a little bit bossy. So I won't probably mix them because I don't want to kind of make them gun shy or anything like that. They do tolerate confinement really well because they're big birds. It's kind of that whole weird thing where, a little Foxy Terrier needs lots of exercise and lots of space to run, whereas a Great Dane is conserving energy and doesn't want to move so much. I find that with our chickens as well, where our smaller chickens, like our Isa Browns, are constantly on the go and they don't necessarily like to be confined or closed in. They like to have an area that they can run around in. Our Brahmas and certainly the Faverolles that are in with them, I've noticed that they're quite content to have a smaller area. They're not running around all the time. They're not super active birds. They just plod along, probably because there's so much more of them to move. They move a bit slower. So they could definitely tolerate confinement in an urban environment. And like I said, they don't like being bullied. They're a calm bird, and so a dominant breed like Isa Browns or Rhode Island Reds, which probably are the bossiest I've seen, you probably don't want to mix them in a mixed flock with them because it could result in some fighting, some pecking order issues and things like that. Now, we've talked about them, but should you add them to your stock? Well, it depends. It depends whether or not you can get your hands on them to start with. So, like I said, the Indonesian black chickens, you can't get them in Australia. So, as much as I'd like to say, yeah, add them to your stock, you actually can't physically get them here. So, probably, they're out. But as far as coping with Aussie weather, depending on where you live, we have such a big continent and we have such a wide variety of weather conditions. And that's the same for the US. In the UK, you're probably more of a colder climate rather than a warmer climate. Certainly when I was over in the UK years ago, I was there at the tail end of beginning of autumn. And people were saying, oh, it's so hot. And I was walking around going, this isn't hot. This is like reasonably mild weather. Mind you, I was also walking around in a T-shirt and everybody else was going, oh, you need to put a jumper on. So you probably have a slightly colder environment generally across the board, unless you're in the very southern parts of the UK. And so you need to factor in the weather thing. So what I said about the Frizzelles and the Silkies as far as their feather, conditioning, if you're in a really cold or wet environment, they're probably not the pick. But certainly the Faverolles, they're a hardy bird. They can handle the cold. They've got feathered legs. They stay a little bit more thermal. If that was something that you wanted to add, then I would say go ahead and do it if you can get a hold of them. And again, Silkies and Faverolles are both brilliant for beginners. So if you are new to chicken keeping, don't think you have to go with the Australorp or the Isa Brown or anything like that. Even the cream leg bars, like I said, they're a little bit more flighty and they're a little bit more vocal and things like that. But if you've got the space, why not? You may as well. Now, it also might be that you're interested in helping conserve particular breeds. And if that's the case, man, jump right in. That's what we're trying to do with the Brahmas now. And I will do it with the Faverolles as well. I really like the idea of keeping heritage breed birds going. And I think it's important that people do that and don't just go, oh, well, I'm just going to get Isa Browns because commercially that makes the most sense. Yeah, it does make the most sense, but it doesn't always have to be about how many eggs you're going to get and how much you can sell them for and how quickly you can recoup costs on it. And, it might be that you have a flock of Isa Browns that are just egg producers that are just bringing in, paying for the rest of them basically. And then you have your heritage breeds, which, believe me, when you sell a heritage breeding pair or set, 2 hens and a rooster to somebody, you will make your money back on those. Heritage breeds are expensive to buy. And so if you get your hands on them, it is definitely worth trying to breed them if you have the space and you're able to keep roosters. It's definitely worth breeding them in order to on-sell more to other people who will then also breed those heritage breed birds and keep it going. Now for sourcing, what I found, believe it or not, is for Australians, Gumtree is great for sourcing for animals because Facebook doesn't allow us to advertise animals for sale. But if you go and have a look at the Facebook groups, you may be able to find breeders who will advertise that they are a breeder, even though they're not advertising birds for sale as such. They'll advertise that they're a breeder on the Facebook groups, and then you can go to their website independently and go and have a look and see what they've got. So don't discount Facebook for that. Go and have a look anyway. Now, the other thing to think about is poultry shows. If you have any poultry shows in your area or any farm shows, livestock shows, pop along to those. Chicken breeders love telling you about their chicken breeds. So go along to those shows and have a look and see what you've got. The gentleman who sold us the Brahmas told us that only a month before, a Brahma rooster had sold at a poultry show up at Goulburn, which is an hour away from us, but in the same region. The rooster sold for $300 for one single rooster. So there is definitely the ability to go and buy these, adult birds. You just have to be willing to spend. And if you're interested in breeding them for the purposes of bringing in some extra income, then going to a poultry show with a beautiful breeding pair of a heritage bird is definitely going to give you the ability to on-sell any other livestock that you've got. So that's a good one to go and look at. Now, if you have got heritage birds, if you've got birds that are unusual that I haven't mentioned, feel free to post and link in Mojo Homestead to it, because I would love to see them. I actually really like checking out the different heritage birds that are available. So even if you're in the US, and I know I won't be able to get all the breeds that you guys have over there, definitely post a picture and link me in, because I love looking at that kind of stuff. So the handy helper, I call him Chicken Daddy, because he never had chickens before. And since we've had chickens in the last 7 years, he has turned himself right round where he is now the ultimate, loves his chickens. He goes and cuddles and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'd love to see if you've got those. The book is still coming along. I know I keep saying that. I'm going to stop saying it, because I'll let you know when the book is out, as far as a step-by-step guide to keeping chickens for eggs. And there's a whole bunch more stuff coming out on our Not the Farmer's Wife store. So we have a made-to-order store that sells clothing and other accessories, and they're all homestead and cow, chicken, bee related kind of stock. So go there and check that out if you haven't. It's www.notthefarmerswife, all one word, .com. It's a Shopify site that I own and run. It's not Amazon, although I do have stuff on Amazon. And I have just released another blog post yesterday. When you're listening to this, that'll be yesterday, that covers off on my books that are available on Amazon, because Amazon is absolutely the best place to get books out there. As a non-typical author, I'm never going to get a publishing deal with a book publishing house. So for me, the only way for me to get my books out there is Amazon. So go and check those out. I've got some journals available now as well. And so you'll see some posts coming up in the next couple of days about the journals. And otherwise, if there's anything you'd like me to discuss, then flick me a message. I would love to hear from you. Next week is our last week on chickens. We are talking about storage of eggs and the gluts of eggs that you get and what to do with them. And after that, I think we're talking all things sourdough, which I currently have a dough rising in a bowl at the moment, because it's school holiday times here in Australia and everybody's going through bread like nothing else. So I feel like I'm making a loaf of bread every day. Anyway, that's it from me. I will talk to you all again next week. Like I say, last week on chickens, and then we're moving into sourdough. We'll see how we go. All things sourdough for a couple of weeks. All right. Bye for now, everyone. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us, or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojohomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.